What's cracking, guys? Bruce Madsen here, your host of Metric Scout Fantasy Football. The other day I dropped a video on a rookie mock draft, and I told you if we got to 100 likes, I'm going to be dropping some Superflex rookie ADP. We just hit that mark, and now it's time for me to pay up. So today we're going to be doing some rookie draft ADP. This is very important because this lets you know where guys are falling in drafts, lets you get a good idea of what discounts are getting or when to pay up. Like, we can talk about this wide receiver being the best guy in the class or most likely the breakout till we're blue in the face. However, if our picks are like 10 rows back, it doesn't even matter. We don't have the opportunity to get them. So we might as well know what's in our range so we can make the best moves possible for our teams, make those projections, and go from there. And this year's set of rookies is crazy, especially with Superflex, because this market does not know how to evaluate the QBs yet. They don't know what they want to do with them. Also, the running backs, wide receivers, especially when you get to that second round, gets a little crazy. But I like that. I like the craziness. I believe that everything's going to stabilize once we get past the combine and once we get past the NFL draft. The NFL draft is just going to lay down the foundation for rookie drafts and make it a lot easier for us to make our evaluations. But with that being said, with what we've just been talking about, this ADP, let's start looking at these players. So with this rookie draft ADP, we did 6 drafts, averaged them out, and now we got guys with their average draft position off these drafts. The first player that's coming off boards on average is Breece Hall. He has an ADP of 2. Usually he's like the second pick off the board. Sometimes he's the 1-on-1 and usually does not fall past the 4th spot, and most time he's being selected ahead of the quarterbacks. The next player that's coming off the board, the second player, is Treylon Burks with an ADP of 2.5, and he's usually being selected anywhere between picks 1 and 3. Never falls past 4, so he's a top-tier guy still in Superflex. The next player that's coming off the board as our third player is Malik Willis. He has an ADP of 3.67. This is very dependent on how the league values quarterbacks. If they value the quarterback position, he's like the 101, 102 range. If they don't, he falls back a little bit. He's usually the first quarterback off the board and drafted either top 3 or the back end of the first round. 4th player off the board usually is Garrett Wilson, 4.5 average draft position. He's jockeying position with Treylon Burks most of the time. He's mostly in the top 5 of Superflex and usually does not drop any farther than 6th in the draft. 5th player off the board on average draft position here is Isaiah Spiller. He had a 5.83 average draft position. Spiller is being drafted around the 5 through 7 range. His earliest is like 4th, and his latest is 8th. So sometimes he will fall in the draft, and sometimes he'll get bumped up early, but usually that sweet spot is the 5 through 7 range in the first round. After this, we got a tie for the next player being selected for the 6th spot. They got the same ADP. First player I'm going to be talking about is Drake London. Usually he's being drafted around the 5 through 7 range, so you can value him about the same as Isaiah Spiller. There were 2 drafts where he fell in the first round to the 9th and 10th spot. It kind of dropped his ADP a bit, but usually if you want to average it out or have a good idea where he's going, it's around the 5 through 7 range, mostly in Superflex. Matt Corral holds the same average draft position. He's 6th player off the board, depending on how you slice it, 6 or 7. He has a 7.17 average draft position, same as Drake London. Usually the second quarterback off the board. His value, just like Malik Willis, is very dependent on how the league values QBs. If the league feels like they want the quarterbacks, he's going up to 102, 103 range. If they don't, he's fallen to the back half of the first round. That's why it's averaged out to like the middle of the draft. 7th player, 8th player off the board here is Kenneth Walker with a 7.5 average draft position. Usually right outside the top 5, usually the 3rd running back off the board. The farthest he's fell is 13th in the draft. In another draft, he fell to 9th overall. The 9th player off the board here is Kenny Pickett. He has an ADP of 9.0. He went 101 in one draft. Farthest he fell was 19th overall. That's a big range of outcomes right there. Usually it rests somewhere between the 7th and 8th range in Superflex. Usually falls to the back half of the first round. To the 10th player off the board is Jameson Williams, 10.5 average draft position. He's fallen to the back end of the first round. There were 3 drafts where he fell to the second round, but usually he's being drafted around the 8th through 9th range. So there are times where a running back or a couple other wide receivers get pumped up, and he ends up being the guy that falls back to the second round. Mostly, he's getting drafted outside the top 5, though. 11th player who's usually off the board is David Bell. He has a 10.83 average draft position. He's usually an early second rounder, unless you're playing in a league with a David Bell fan, and they're usually falling around the 6th to 8th pick in the draft in the first round. Outside the top 5, but heavy inside the top 10. The 12th player off the board usually is Chris Olave, 11.33 average draft positions. He's a fringe late first, early second round pick. Sometimes he falls to like the 16th overall range. Sometimes he goes as high as 9, but he's usually around that area, about the 112, 201 area of the draft. Next player that's fallen in drafts is George Pickens. He has an average draft position of 13.17 and is usually an early second round pick, falling in between like the 12, the 14 range. Sometimes he's like the last pick in the first round. Usually he's in the 201, 202 area, which is a good value for a wide receiver of his talents. Sam Howell is the next player who's usually being selected with a 13.67 average draft position. This is a mega value for a quarterback in Superflex. A lot of times you can snag him at the 112, 111, and then there are times where he falls to the 201, 202 range. So for a first-round quarterback, you're getting a good value with Sam Howell. The next player off the board in drafts is Jahan Dotson, and he's holding an average draft position of 15.00. He's steadfast in the second round, usually the mid portion of the second round. There was a draft where he got bumped up to the first round, like the last pick, and there was a couple where he fell to the back half of the second round, but usually he's smack dab in the middle of the second. The next player who's usually being drafted is Kyron Williams. He's holding an average draft position of 15.17. Falling to the early mid portion of the second round, he's usually being drafted there in Superflex. There are also some leagues that I've noticed that's not part of my group of drafts that drafts him in the back portion of the first round. I feel like his draft position is really going to be dependent on landing spot and what he does at the combine. Next player off the board in these drafts, James Cook, holding an ADP of 18.5. Usually a mid to late second round option, and he will fall to the third round in rookie drafts. Really just depends on who's in the league and who's willing to pull the trigger in that mid to late portion of the second round. Next player is usually coming off the board is Rachaad White. He holds a 19.33 average draft position. Usually he's being drafted mid to late portion of the second round, but unlike James Cook, he's not falling to round 3. Drafters are not letting him hit round 3. He's usually getting pulled in the second round, usually middle range, sometimes latter part, but he does not drop the round 3. We never see him hit the first round. Usually the 16 to 20 range is where we're seeing him get drafted. Next player coming off the board usually is Wan'Dale Robinson, 19.83 average draft position. He's not too far off from Rachaad White, late second rounder, discount player falling around the 20th range of the draft, 20th overall. Next player coming off the board, a quarterback, Carson Strong, 20.17 ADP. Good value for a quarterback in Superflex, a second rounder that you can gamble on here, usually in the 20 range. Highest has been 16, and he has fell to the third round in some drafts. The next player who's usually coming off the board here is Trey McBride. He's holding an ADP of 21.0 late second rounder who's usually fallen to the 22 to 24 overall range. Never falls to the third round. He's usually locked into the late second. Next player coming off the board is Justin Ross. 21.17 average draft position. His range is usually around the 21 to 24 overall range of the draft. He's a mega value. The NFL draft is really going to tell us where to draft him. If the NFL drafts him in the top 100, it's wheels up to pull the trigger on him in the early part of the second round, maybe even first. If they don't, you may want to fade him. If he fades in the NFL draft, that's letting us know the medicals might not be checking out. The next player who's usually coming off the board is Desmond Ridder, another quarterback value with a 21.15 average draft position. And his range is usually around the 18 to 22 of Superflex. Doesn't really fall out of the second round. I think there was one draft where he fell to the third, but really doesn't fall out of the second. Last player is Tyler Algier. 23.5 average draft position. He is a huge value in Superflex right now in these drafts. There are times where he falls to the third round or doesn't get drafted in 2-round drafts, but usually he's falling in the 19 to 24 range, making him a late second round pick. But this is making him a big time value due to his size adjusted speed, his college production, and I imagine his combine results is going to give him a boost in value. But these are my top 24 guys in ADP. There are a few other guys I got ADP on, but it's kind of sporadic and not really worth talking about. But these are my top dudes here that I've gathered data on. Let me know what you think about these values. I'm going to try and do more mock drafts, maybe get another round or group of ADP for next month. That way, we got some different value shifts from after the combine. But this is the rookie ADP that I got for you guys as we're heading into the combine this week. This is what it's looking like. This is what it's looking in drafts. And the other mock drafts that I've seen is very comparable to what I have. What I can tell you about drafts right now, especially for Superflex, it's very dependent on whether your league values that quarterback position. If they're drafting quarterback at 101, 102, or they're letting the quarterbacks fade. Also in Superflex, since the quarterbacks are mixed in with those values, you're seeing sometimes like a Drake London or a Jameson Williams fall a little further than expected. I think there was a draft or two where Drake London fell in double digits, like 10 or 11, and Jameson Williams fell to the second round. You'll sometimes catch some of that stuff. Second round, usually pretty steady, but you'll see some players, some running backs pop up there in that second round range. I saw Christian Watson get drafted in the second round of a draft, so second round can get a little flighty sometimes. You'll see some differences, but I imagine that's going to get locked up once we get combine numbers and the draft. The second round is going to be pretty steady once we get that additional information, but I really wanted to get you to this average draft position so you get an idea of what the markets are looking like. And again, my average draft position is going to look a lot different from the ADP of this website and ADP of this website just because the markets are crazy right now when it comes to valuing these players. And you can do tons of mock drafts, get your averages as fine-tuned as possible, and it's still going to be different because of just how people are evaluating this quarterback class. Not only the quarterbacks itself, how it's being valued compared to the skill players, but the quarterbacks in general, like ranking them 1 through 5, it's all over the place. So you'll go look at the internet, you got Sam Howell's the top guy, over here you got Malik Willis, over here you got Matt Corral, over here some random dude's got Desmond Ridder. It is just crazy right now, and we're just waiting for more data to get things locked tight to get a good feel of what the values are going to truly be. But this is the best I got for you. And this is just another data point for us to look at as we head further into draft season. But I want to thank you for watching the show, sticking with me. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on the way out. Every subscription matters. It fuels me to keep rocking this content. It fuels me to watch the tape, dig up the metrics, everything else. Again, I want to thank you, and I'll catch you next time.